What's up, folks? Nate here at Dyno Works. I am back on the dyno yet again with our 2024 Triumph Street Triple 765 RS, doing even more exhaust-specific testing and tuning. Today we've got the full system from Austin Racing installed on our 765 RS. It is mean, it is loud, it is absolutely freaking brutal sounding, and it performs shockingly well. Now, I say shockingly well because in the past I've actually been pretty critical of a lot of the Austin Racing exhaust systems we've seen over the last decade or so here on our dyno, because oftentimes they go so big, it's just overkill when it comes to the actual collector and mid-pipe designs, that you end up losing a lot of the exhaust pulse velocity due to exhaust gas expansion inside the pipe. There's always a trade-off when it comes to collector and mid-pipe diameters and overall outlet diameters, because at a certain point the gas will essentially lose its escape velocity because it's expanding so much. It's only got so much energy to expend, so if it's doing that while it's expanding instead of exiting, well, you simply end up with less airflow. But on these bikes in particular, the bigger the mid-pipe and the collector diameter is, the more power they seem to make. And the mid-pipe and the collector diameter and the outlet diameter with that dual-tip exhaust system on this Austin Racing pipe is much bigger here than any other exhaust I've seen yet for any 765 platform. Not only does it have the enormous collector and mid-pipe, it's also got the crossover tubes between the head pipes that I've already covered to death on these bikes, and we've already established is pretty much a must-have when you're looking at making maximum horsepower and torque throughout the majority of the rev range. Now, as always, before we dive into the specific output of the exhaust system we have on our bike right now, let's just quickly recap where this bike started from in bone stock configuration and then stock with our custom ECU mapping in place, so we can really narrow down the improvements that the Austin Racing system itself is providing. We're also going to quickly recap the Ram air tube modification, which I still have in place on our bike, because, well, it's free and gives you free horsepower, so pretty much everybody should be doing it. So let's get through this here really quickly. The red line there on the dyno graph is our bike in 100% bone stock trim, made about 118.6 horsepower and 55.7 pound-feet of torque to the tire on pump gas. The blue line is the exact same configuration when it comes to the intake and exhaust. No physical changes are made to the bike whatsoever, but our custom tuning is in place. You're picking up about 4 horsepower at the peak, about 2 pound-feet of torque through pretty much the entirety of the rev range, and the bike just runs massively smoother and stronger everywhere. We've already covered this stuff to death in multiple videos, so I'm not going to spend much time talking about it. Now, the green line there is with the Leo Vince exhaust system installed and our custom ECU mapping optimized for the airflow characteristics of that pipe. And as you can see, you gain significant performance right off the bottom here at 4,000, a big chunk of horsepower and torque from about 4,000 to 8,000 RPM, and then from 9,000 RPM up, it's not even the same planet when it comes to power and torque. Power skyrockets up to 130 horsepower, and you're now making just about 60 pound-feet to the tire on pump gas. And until now, that Leo Vince system was pretty much my favorite one for these 765s. And then we just really quickly need to touch on the free Ram air tube modification that I just covered in our previous intake testing video, because it's still on the bike, so we need to be able to be aware of that so we can compare sort of apples to apples here when it comes to analyzing the output of just the Austin Racing system itself. The red line there is what happens when you perform that free Ram air tube modification, where you're essentially just removing the rubber tube from the intake tract to free up some of the intake. You're picking up power right here in the dip around 8,500 RPM, and you're picking it up from about 10,000 RPM all the way to peak power. So it's literally just free horsepower by opening up the intake tract. And this red line is what we're going to compare the Austin Racing system to, because we still have that modification done on our bike right now. Okay, now that we've recapped all of that, let's finally get into the outright performance improvements that the Austin Racing provides compared to my prior favorite exhaust system from Leo Vince. So that red line there is the Leo Vince exhaust system, the free Ram air tube modification, and our custom ECU mapping on our bike. And the blue line is the Austin Racing. You can see that there is one spot here between about 6,000 and 7,000 RPM where that enormous outlet diameter and collector and mid-pipe diameter does produce a noticeable amount of torque and horsepower less than the Leo Vince. But pretty much everywhere from 7,500 RPM all the way to about 10,500 RPM, the Austin Racing system simply flows more air. And there's no way around that. Even out here at the very top end of the rev range, it actually carries just a little bit further. It makes the torque sooner in the rev range, and it makes about a pound-foot of torque more from peak to peak than the Leo Vince system does. Because that collector, mid-pipe, and outlet diameter is just so freaking huge, it allows it to simply flow more air. Now, I say that the Leo Vent system used to be my favorite exhaust system because for the way that I ride these bikes, which is primarily on the track and at track days, I'm never down here. Like, I'm never at 6,000 or 7,000 RPM on a racetrack on these bikes. You're always at 8,000 and up. And it simply makes more power in the portion of the rev range that I'm going to be using. Now, down here at the very bottom end, it's pretty hard to notice, but there's actually a huge change in airflow right around 3,000 to 3,500 RPM compared to the Leo Vent system when you have the Austin Racing installed. The thing is just so big that it simply does not flow very well until you get the velocity of the air moving quite a ways up in the rev range. So you certainly notice it when you're riding the bike with the Austin Racing installed, just kind of right off idle all the way to about 3,500. It's just a little bit choppy, and that has nothing to do with tuning. We've corrected the fueling down there perfectly. It's just simply due to the fact that that enormous diameter does reduce the airflow through the engine until you get the engine frickin' moving. And that seems to be the downfall on just about every bike that I've ever seen that has these enormous collector and mid pipes, is that you do end up with losses down here off the bottom and through some portions of the mid-range, but you usually don't get this much more back as a result. And in this particular application, you simply do. So if you can live with the really kind of right off the bottom end losses and this noticeable dip between 6,000 and 7,000 RPM to gain all of this, there's no way around it. The Austin Racing system is objectively better than anything else I've seen thus far on these 765s. And I'll be 100% honest, from a subjective personal opinion standpoint, I didn't want the Austin Racing to perform nearly as well as it does. They are so brutal sounding and so freaking loud that even though in this room I'm wearing noise-canceling earmuffs, and when I'm on the track I wear noise-canceling earbuds, it's still a brutal, savage-sounding exhaust system that you absolutely hear regardless of what you're shoving in your ear and what helmet you have on. So from that standpoint, I was hoping it wouldn't do better than the Leo Vents, which sounds much more subdued than the Austin Racing system does. But all I personally care about on track is outright performance throughout the portion of the rev range that I use, and that just makes the Austin Racing better. One other thing I'll quickly touch on here that you guys might find interesting is how dramatic the differences are in the fueling needs from something like the Leo Vent system to this Austin Racing system. So this is just one of the passes after I'd finished warming up the bike with the Austin Racing system installed, but our mapping still in place for that Leo Vent system in the Ram Air 2 mod. And you can see that if you look down here at the air fuel chart, the dashed red line is my wide open throttle target on these bikes, and it's all over the frickin' place. You're talking like nearly 20% rich here, about 11 or 12% lean there, call that almost 10% too rich there, 10% too lean there. It's literally all over the place. And this is why we go through all of this intake and exhaust specific testing and tuning, because you absolutely cannot have these bikes properly tuned for a full system from, say, like a Leo Vents to something like the Austin Racing, or even from like the Spark to the Aero. The fueling needs are dramatically different from one system to another. Now, it's also really important to note that I put the stock velocity stacks back in the bike before doing any of this testing, because a lot of folks aren't going to go through the hassle of replacing the velocity stacks for the cost versus power that you get. Most people are just going to be doing the exhaust modifications and the free Ram Air Tube mod that we've shown you how to do now in multiple videos. So for the numbers that I've shown you here, just keep in mind that the stock stacks are still in that airbox. Now, a customer actually sent us this exhaust system to go ahead and build mapping for, which is why I didn't bother taking off the brackets, and it's just kind of floating here. So I'm going to quickly go ahead and swap the velocity stacks back in there. I'm probably not going to make a video for that, but I do need to be able to build the mapping for this setup with both the equal length short stacks, equal length tall stacks, and the short long short stack configuration that I covered in depth in our intake video. So just know that I will have the mapping built for that. I'm just on a bit of a time crunch. I need to get this back out to the customer and get his ECU flashed, so I'm probably not going to show those results on camera. But the same performance characteristics and overall changes to the power curve from modifying the velocity stacks are going to function essentially exactly the same way with the Austin Racing system as it did with the Leo Vents. You're going to gain more power by replacing the velocity stacks. We'll have mapping built for it. I just don't have the time to sit here and show you exactly what that looks like on a dyno graph today. So, that's where I'm going to wrap up this video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it. Obviously, the Austin Racing system is now the overall output king from all the systems I've seen thus far for these bikes, and there's not many left for me to test. I've got a full Zard exhaust incoming that we need to test, and then I'm going to do a little bit more testing just because people keep asking about it for the older generation OEM header that you can go ahead and just pull off the muffler for, or the slip-on for, and replace with a couple other slip-ons. So we'll be covering that as well in a future video. But as far as exhaust systems that are currently available on the market, now that we've done this one, and I'm probably doing the Zard next week, I think we've pretty much covered them all. If you guys think there's one I'm still missing, please let me know. Send us an email at support@tools.com. Say, hey, by the way, I've got this, and if I take a look and it's a popular system and I've somehow just overlooked it, well, either get it from one of our customers, or we'll just buy it here to go ahead and build the mapping, because our guarantee here is that we'll always be able to provide you guys with the highest quality custom intake and exhaust specific tuning for these bikes than you'll be able to find anywhere else on the planet. So to do that, I gotta make sure I cover literally everything. Now, our mail-in ECU flashing service is available for these bikes and the Moto 2s here in North America at tooldynoworks.com. So if you're looking to get your ECU flashed with our custom ECU mapping for your bike-specific intake and exhaust configuration, head over to tooldynoworks.com, purchase our mail-in ECU flashing service, follow the instructions there on our site, ship it out to us, and we'll get it flashed and shipped right back to you the very same day we receive it. And as always, if you do have any questions about one intake or one exhaust or one setup versus another, or tuning about these bikes or whatever it is, don't hesitate to email us. You can get a hold of me directly at support@tooldynoworks.com. I'm the guy that personally answers any and all tech support questions every single day that we receive them, and both myself and my staff are always truly happy to help.